Hello there, it's Cassie. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I have the Brutus Monroe August 2019 inspiration box, and this one's called Steampunk. It is no longer available, but I will have everything that you can still get linked down below, so be sure to check that out. Let's go ahead and get started with our first card. I'm using some Strathmore 140-pound watercolor paper, and I have that cut down to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I'm pulling out my Tonic Easy Clean mat. This came with my glass mat, and I'm using 3 different Distress Oxide colors. That first one is called Old Paper, and I'm doing something that I've done many times before, just doing some ink smushing. So I spritz that with some water, and then I'm just sticking my paper down into the ink, and then I'm going to heat set that in between each layer. The next color that I've chosen is Wild Honey, and I wish honestly that I hadn't put so much down. This is a very bright color. I end up liking it in the end, but at first I thought, oh no, I've ruined it, because there is a lot there. And I decided to go in order of lightest to darkest, which is why I chose Old Paper, then the Wild Honey, and now I'm using the Aged Mahogany. And because I went crazy with the Wild Honey, I am using just a piece of old packaging, and this way I feel like I have a little bit more control over where I am putting that Aged Mahogany. And once again, I am heat setting that in between each of those layers. Now that everything is good and dry, because I want to make sure that it is completely dry, I am sticking that inside of my Misti, and I'm going to grab out the gorgeous girl image that comes in the Steampunk stamp set. She is stunning. If you enjoy coloring, you want to get her. So I have her in my Misti, and I'm going to ink her up with some of the Raven Detail ink. And because I'm doing this on the Strathmore 140-pound watercolor paper, and I'm doing this on the very textured side, I definitely have to ink up my image about 3-4 times. VersaFine Onyx Black ink would have probably worked fine too, but I still would have had to ink it up a few times. And it's fine. As long as you're using like a Misti or some sort of stamp positioning tool, you won't have any issue just re-inking and re-stamping. And then when I'm happy with how well she's stamped out, I'll pull her out. I trim down a little bit of the gray paper and also her. And so that way I have just a little bit of that dark gray paper kind of sticking out of the back. I'm using some liquid glue to adhere that down to my gray paper. And then there you can see that I have that nice border. It really makes her pop even more. For some dimension, I grab my Scotch foam tape and I'll put that all over the back. Because I have a white card base, it's just a hard, a heavyweight white card base. It's an A2 sized, and then I'll stick that down so I have some dimension. I'm grabbing these Chitchat from Holtz Idea-ology. They're called Chitchat stickers, and I just thought it would be kind of fun. These went so well with the design of this stamp that I end up using them for all the cards. For an added bit of embellishments, I'm grabbing the sequins that came in the kit along with my Ranger Multimedia mat and my crystal katana, because of course I have to have my crystal katana. And then I'm just sticking each of those sequins down. I love this sequin mix because there's just such a variety in there. You've got some that have giant holes in them that look like gears almost, and then you have some square ones. It's just really a beautiful mix. And then that's going to finish off our first card. And this is just an easy way to take an intricate stamp and make it a little bit faster to make a card. Okay, so let's move on to card number 2. I'm going to do some more stamping. So I've got some Express It cardstock, and I'm going to put that inside of my Misti, and I'm going to use the awesome hat stamp with the feathers and the flower, and I'm going to ink that up with my Raven Detail ink because this is alcohol marker friendly. And so is my Express It cardstock. And then I don't show you the coloring, but I just use my Arteza Everblend. If I had showed the coloring, this video would be so much longer, and it's already pretty long as it is. So for my background, I've got some of that gray cardstock that came in the kit. It's a very light gray, and I'm going to use some Distress Oxide ink in the color Hickory Smoke, along with my Vivace Beauty brush. So this is one of my smaller ones, and I am just inking up the edges. And once I was done doing that, I cleaned up my mess, and then I moved on to the little wings that I have. So those wings are, you can get those in the store. They're laser cut wings, And then I'll have those listed down below. I inked that up with my embossing ink from Brutus Monroe, and then covered that with the Gilded Sparkle embossing powder that came inside the kit. I'm tapping all that excess off. So this embossing powder is just like the Gilded Gold that's in the store, but it has some sparkle to it, and it's gorgeous. Love it. Yeah, I don't know if I'll probably end up using all of this up because it's gorgeous. So I'm just heating that, and you can see till it's smooth and melted. So pretty. And then I am going to take the Deco foil adhesive pen, and I'm going to kind of put that in a couple of spots just on my background. And then I'm going to use the copper Deco foil. I'm also putting it on the wings too. I thought, well, let's give that a try. I've never used this Deco foil pen, but we're gonna see. And it ended up working out okay. It says to kind of let it dry for about 30 seconds, and then you can put your copper down or your foil, rub it, and then wow, isn't that so cool? I may have become a little bit addicted to foiling since I started doing it, and now that there are even more tools to do with the foiling, it's gonna get ugly, kids. Or in this case, super pretty, but it's gonna get bad. Anyway, so I'm just rubbing that on the wings, and it worked really well on top of that embossing powder. I was not sure how that would work, but it worked out really, really well. So then it adds this whole element of texture to those wings that weren't there before. I'm once again pulling out my Chitchat stickers. There's just so many great little sentiments in there, or little sayings, not necessarily sentiments, but I end up putting "You simply inspire." And then to make that stand out even more, I just grab one of my little ballpoint pens and I very loosely kind of mark around it. So it'll make them pop just even that much more. So it's a super loose line, and it goes pretty well with those copper background markings that I made. I'm going to use some liquid glue to adhere down my wing to my panel. And then for the hat, I'm actually going to grab some of, it's new to me and I'm excited about it. I was a little cautious because I've had this stuff before, not from Brutus Monroe, but from other companies. And I wasn't excited about that because it just didn't work that well. But I thought I'd give this a try. This is 1/16 of an inch, so it's not quite as thick as like your normal Scotch foam tape. So it gives just a little bit of dimension without going too crazy. And I found that the backing paper on previous ones that I've had has a really, really hard time coming off. But this one, I was very easily able to use my paper piercer to just kind of pull the backing just a little and then pull the rest of it off with my fingernail. And then even working further with it, I didn't have any issues just kind of using my fingers later on. So I am a big fan. Now I want to get the 1/8 inch, and I also have it in white and black. So that's really cool. And that's going to finish off card number 2. Love how that ended up turning out. For card number 3, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to use some shrink film, or shrinky dinks, if you remember from when we were kids, or whatever you remember about shrink plastic. I haven't used this stuff in a hot minute, but Brutus Monroe has some, and so I thought I'm going to use this because there are some big, beautiful images in this set, and so I wanted to see how it would work. And I've put the shrink film that I have into my Misti, and I'm deciding on which stamp that I want to use, and then I'm going to stick that down, and I'll close the door of my Misti, pick up my stamp, making sure everything stays where it's supposed to, and I'm using Stays On Jet Black ink. So this is a permanent ink. It goes on most surfaces, well, all surfaces. I imagine the surface ink from Brutus Monroe would work really well too. So I close the door real quick, and then I'm going to clean off my stamp, which I'm using some archival ink cleaner. And then I will just clean that off with a rag that I have. And then there is a little bit of staining on the stamp, but that never really seems to bother me. To color my image, I'm using some Prismacolor pencils. I'm not sure if you could use alcohol inks. I may try that in the future just to see, but the Prismacolor or any kind of colored pencil would work really well. What you don't want to use is maybe like a dye ink base of some sort, because it will rub off. And the reason I use Stays On is because it's quick drying and it won't smear. I did try other inks and I did have some smearing, but once you dry it, you're not going to have as much of an issue. I'm using all those different various colors. White shows up really nicely on the shrink plastic, and then I'm using my Brutus Monroe scissors to cut around it. If you wanted to do anything to it, like put a hole in it to make a charm, you have to do it before you shrink it. And I'm not using an oven, I'm going to use my heat tool. So I don't know if this is something you've ever seen before, but I will prepare you. So I'm using my peeper piercer just to kind of keep it in place, and I'm using my heat tool. And you know, there is a point of panic when you're heating these up because it starts to curl really, really bad, and you think, oh great, I've ruined it, there's no way of fixing it, it's all going to stick in on itself. But just stick with it and keep heating, because it will flatten out. And if you don't get it to be completely flat how you want it, you can always just stick like an acrylic block on top of it. And so I'm just heating that just a little bit more, kind of getting its shape back, making sure that I've heated it thoroughly. I'll stick the block on it, and then I'll show you just how well that turned out. I forgot how fun shrink plastic is. So here's some shrinky dinks, and I did do a couple more off camera. Now I'm taking one of the foilables, and I'm using some antique linen along with one of my Vivas Beauty brushes just to ink up some of the edges. I'm leaving the center kind of light, and then I will clean up my mess, and then I'm going to take some of that copper that I used early. This is the copper deco foil, and I'll run that through my laminator. So I have the Amazon Basics laminator, and the way to get this thing to work, I just stick it in a shim or just a piece of copy paper, and I run it through about 3-4 times. I don't even look at it, I just run it through 3 or 4 times, and then I don't have any issues with the foiling working perfectly. So isn't that cool? Golly, you go from this sheet that has all that black on it and white to this beautiful colored pattern. And so there are the 3 images that I have colored, and I've also cut out 3 circles using one of my circle dies along with some of the white paper that came in the kit. And I'm going to pull out some of the trim that also came in the kit, and I'll trim that down because I want to have 2 pieces of it on there. And this holds it in place pretty well. It's not perfect, but it does hold it in place pretty well, enough that I don't have to worry about it coming off of my card. But to ensure that that stays down on the back, I will end up using just a couple pieces of washi tape. I debated because I thought, well, is that going to make it a little too thick? But it doesn't, because the washi tape's super thin, so it really doesn't matter. So I just take a couple pieces of that washi tape and just stick that down. And then to get my card panel onto my card base, I use some more of that 1/8 inch score tape. I just use it all along the edges, and then a couple pieces in the center, so it keeps it on straight. So there's what it looks like before and after. And then I'm going to take some of that liquid glue that I have, and I'll adhere down all 3 of those circles to the front of my panel. And then I'm also going to use that same liquid glue to adhere down my little shrinky dinks, my shrink plastic. That's so fun. I just forgot how much fun that really is. And with bigger images like that, you can still get a lot of good detail. I ended up dropping it right onto my card, but it's okay because I end up putting the sentiment up there too, so it's not a big deal. And the glue wiped away pretty easily. And so I once again grab those Chitchat stickers, and I end up grabbing Discover Your Courage. I thought that was a fun little sentiment. And then that's going to finish off card number 3. A lot of fun techniques in that one. Card number 4 is a super easy one, but I do have a little bit of a blunder. So I'm using some of the foil paper that came in the kit along with the Derice embossing folder, and I'm running that through my machine. I think there is something with my machine because I followed all the instructions on the plates. Now my plates have been dropped a few times. That could be part of the problem, but I think that I might be looking into a new machine down the road. So following the instructions, I still had a bit of an issue. It took this paper and it just about destroyed it. And I debated just getting rid of it, but then I thought, no, this is still usable. We can do something with this. And I like the distress look that it sort of has to it. So I'm going to use it anyway. It's too pretty of a paper to get rid of. I've grabbed out my terracotta surface ink from Brutus Monroe, and I'm lightly going over the top, just getting those raised edges to kind of give a little bit more of a distressed look on this paper, trying not to tear it any more than it has been torn. And then I have just a heavyweight card base. This is white paper, and I'm going to take that paper and I am going to use some liquid glue all over the back, trying to keep pieces all in their same spot, going over all of those spots as well, especially where the tears were. So that way when I place this down onto my card base, I don't have any issue with anything falling off or peeling up or anything like that. And keep in mind that surface ink does stay wet for a little while, just a little bit of time, and then you're good to go. I'm grabbing those Chitchat stickers one more time, and I'm putting "May we cherish family." I thought that was a sweet little saying that you could send to a family member on a card, or you could even send it as a thank you to a family member. I just thought that was a fun, and I think that's another reason why I like these Chitchat stickers. You can come up with all kinds of little sayings. So, may we cherish family. And then that's going to finish off card number 4. Card number 5 is another easy card to make. I'm going to do just mostly embossing. I've grabbed some of that black cardstock from the kit, and I'm also using that glitter stock, but I don't want to use too much of it because I want to save as much as possible, so I used a rectangle die to pull out the center. It's just a little trick, so you can save some of that paper. I have covered that black cardstock with my magic embossing bag, and now I am stamping all over that background using that gorgeous, gorgeous rose stamp. I am in love with that rose stamp, and I am just randomly stamping it all over the background. And don't worry about the embossing bag leaving all that residue. That is easily wiped away later with like a microfiber cloth or even your hand. And now that I've got that covered, I'm going to use that Gilded sparkle embossing powder that came in the kit. This stuff is just so, so gorgeous, and on a black cardstock background, it just really, really pops. I don't know what it is about black and gold, but they are beautiful together. So I'm just picking up little pieces where I think I might have missed, but that embossing, magic embossing bag worked so well that I don't have any of those stray powder anywhere. Now I'm using my heat tool to make sure that all of that is smooth and melted, and I won't show you all of the embossing, but isn't that beautiful? You can see the difference. Next I had cut down some of the trim that came in the kit. This is some foil rickrack, and I'm using liquid glue on this because it's rickrack, and I wanted to make sure that it would stay, all the edges, and it takes a second to dry. So I'm trying to hold that in place and flip it, and then I will use some washi tape to make sure that I keep everything in place. And you won't see this because it's just on the back of the card panel, so no big deal. As you can tell, I also have another one of those white card bases. And then I am going to take liquid glue. Now, if I'd been thinking, I would have just used like some 1/8 inch score tape, but for whatever reason, I decided to use liquid glue. Probably because it was there, and yeah, wasn't really thinking. It works fine. It does shift just a little bit, so it doesn't stay completely centered like I would have liked it to, but that's okay. And then I also use a little bit of the liquid glue all around the edges to try and attach that to my card base. And I do use a little bit of score tape in the center. I should have just used score tape all around the entire edges. Grabbing those Chitchat stickers one more time, I put "So Thoughtful" on the front, and now we have an awesome little thank you card that was so easy to produce. Card number 6 is a shaker. I just could not help it. I did start out with one of the foilables once again, and I'm using pumice stone distress oxide ink along with my Vivas brushes. I don't actually end up using this piece in this card, but I do use it for another card. So once again, I'll run that through my laminator about 4 times, and this is the Brutus Monroe Deco foil called Dry Brush, and isn't that beautiful? Oh, love it. So I do, like I said, use it on a card later. I originally tried to use the Deco foil glue pen, and I just was not having a lot of luck with it, and I was afraid I was ruining the pen trying to do it over these laser cuts. So instead I grab a spatula along with the Deco foil transfer gel, and I just put that all over that laser cut, and it was easy. So I do it on both. I mean, you can tell that I tried to use the glue pen on the top, but it, like I said, just wasn't having a lot of luck. So I just set that off to the side. So with this gel, what you're supposed to do is put a thin coat on, and then you set it aside to dry for about an hour, and you'll know it's dry when it's clear. And it probably took a lot less time than an hour, but I just took that opportunity to step away and, you know, get something to drink, and then I came back and everything was good to go. So I ran this through my laminator as well a couple times, and that worked so much better. That worked out so well. And that first one I used champagne on, and this second one I used gold shattered glass. Didn't that turn out so cool? I ended up grabbing one of the lighter gray cardstocks from the kit, and I'm going to take this first one and I'm just going to use some Ranger Multimedia matte on the back of it, and then I'm going to adhere that down to that gray cardstock. This will be one of the card panels, and then my card base is going to end up being once again a white heavyweight card base. So that is how that works out really nicely. And then I have some acetate that I've cut down, and I'm going to use some score tape. This is 1/4 inch, and it just basically covers that whole side on all around the edges. It covers all of that. Probably a little big in some areas, but I wanted to make sure this wasn't going anywhere. And then once I have that covered, I'll peel off all that backing paper, and I do end up using a little bit of multimedia matte on that as well, using it just to make sure. I was trying to see if I could get it to move just a little, like, so I'd have a little bit of wiggle time, but I didn't. That score tape worked really, really well. And then I'll take my acetate and I will stick that down on top. And I guess I cut my acetate just a little too big, so I'll just take my scissors and I will cut off the excess. No big deal. It was super easy to do, and wasn't an issue at all. And then I'll get ready to start making the shaker elements. So I've got my Scotch foam tape, because I like using this for shakers because it's nice and stiff typically, so it's easier to double up. And then I will take that and I'll put it all around the outside edges, and then I'm peeling off all that paper as well. And when I have all of that all over those edges, I'm going to grab the sequin mix that came in the kit, and I'll dump a bunch of that inside, because this is obviously the whole front of a A2 size card, so I want to make sure that I have plenty of elements in there. I do leave some for some other cards and things later, but and then I'll go ahead and put my top down and push down really well, just to make sure that that isn't going anywhere and none of those shaker elements will fall out of there. It's a fairly busy background, but I love how this turned out. It's all those gears and stuff. I grabbed the Chitchat stickers one more time, and my sentiment is be creative every day. I thought that was fun and very fitting. Attach that to a card base, and my card is all done and ready to go. Little break from cards, we are going to use the little bottle cap charms that came in the kit as well. I am using some of the foil paper and along with one of my small circle dies, because I found that that was the one that would fit the best inside of the charm. And there it is. We are going to just make a little charm out of that. And I used some glossy glaze for this, and my glossy glaze is just in a different bottle because it has a very fine tip. But I am pulling off that cap so that I can pour this stuff in there. It does take a decent amount of glossy glaze, and so I'm pouring that in there just a little bit. I don't need a lot at this point because I'm just trying to stick the circle down that I just cut out, and then I'll stick one of the gears that came in the kit. These are the little charms. I'll zoom in for you so you can see a little bit better what I'm doing. And then I'm pouring more of that glossy glaze over the top. You're kind of working in layers here. And yes, it is very milky and cloudy, but that will change. You just have to be patient when you're making something like this, because it does need a lot of time to cure. So I'm using a pin to move things around a little bit, get them kind of where I want them. Like I said, you can't see it super great, but you get an idea of where things are going. I grabbed the Imagine sticker that was inside of my Chitchat. And then I'm going to put that in, poked it in with the pen, and I'm going to pour a little bit more glossy glaze over the top of that. And I put it more towards the bottom. And then I will just use that pen to kind of manipulate that glossy glaze around a little bit. Because when this glossy glaze dries, it kind of dries back just a little bit, so it won't be like overflowing by any means. And then I grab a few of the sequins from the sequin mix. This is another reason why I was happy that I didn't use them all in the last card, the shaker. So I pull some of those out. Just wanted to put 3. This is not that big of an area. So I pull one of those silver, push it down with the pen, cover it up with the glossy glaze. Then I take one of them that looks a little bit like a gear. I put that up above Imagine, poke it in, manipulate the glossy glaze around a little bit, and then I grab one more of those small silver ones and put it at the very bottom, push it in, and then get that glossy glaze all around it. So let me show you what I'm talking about, how it will dry back a little, not dry back, but like the cloudiness is an issue now, but it won't be later. And this one isn't 100% dry, but this is just after a good amount of time. You can see how it's coming together. Right, for card number 7, I just had to use the cogwheel glitter glaze, but for starters, I just have a piece of the cardstock that came in the kit, and I am using my Vivos Beauty brushes to put some hickory smoke all around the edges like I did once before. And then once I have that all around the edges, I'll move on to the next part. I obviously went really crazy making cards for this kit. These kits are so well worth the money. I mean, I can't go on enough about that. All right, so the next part is that I am just going to tape this down to a stencil by Brutus Monroe, and this one's called Paint Spots, and I love this stencil. I haven't used it yet, surprisingly, but I had to use it with this glitter glaze. And this stuff works a lot like Nouveau glitter paste. The only difference is this stuff doesn't dry as quick, which can be nice, because one of the things I noticed about the glitter glaze, or not glitter glaze, the Nouveau glitter paste, is that it just dries so fast that it can about ruin your stencils. You have to move so quickly with that stuff. Whereas this, you do have some wiggle room, which is nice. So I just spread that all over. And then when I'm happy with how that's covered, I can wipe off my spatula, and then I can pull things, the stencil off, and I don't have to run to the sink right away. But you do, I mean, I wouldn't let it sit there for too long. You will want to wipe that up within a good amount of time. Or, as I've heard other people do, they just stick them in like a bucket of water that's close by. The next part was the stamping. So I pulled out that gorgeous rose stamp. I couldn't wait to ink this up and actually color it. And so I'm going to ink that up with my Detail Raven ink, which is good for alcohol markers, and then stamp that down on my Express It cardstock. And then I don't show you the coloring, but I use the Arteza Everblend markers, and then I went ahead and fussy cut that out. Now, I did let this sit for a minute and it wasn't 100% dry, so I'm just using my heat tool, and that's okay to do. You just want to keep it moving. And now you can see the difference. You can tell the dryness. I once again grabbed out my Chitchat. Well, no, these ones aren't the Chitchat. These are the Small Talk stickers from Tim Holtz, and these are a little bit snarky. So I don't know, I thought these were a lot of fun. And because there's so much texture on my background, I do use some of the Multimedia matte to make sure that these stick down. They are stickers, but because, again, there's so much texture, I wanted to make sure that I had something to make sure and keep it down. I grabbed out the foam tape, the Brutus Monroe 1/16 inch foam tape, and used that all over the back of my roses, and then just went ahead and adhered this to a white card base, and that finishes off card number 7. Love how this one turned out. And then I did make one more bonus card, and this just used the extra piece that I had made from earlier, and I used another one of those little snarky comments right on it. And now let's go ahead and take a look at all the cards that I went ahead and made today, cards and charms. Like I've said before, there is so much in this kit that you're going to be making stuff for days. And that's how all their kits are. That's why I think I'm just usually going to make 5 cards, and then I get going and I'm like, no, but I want to use this. Oh, but I also want to use this. So this is why you have 8 technically, 8 cards to choose from and some charms. But I'd love to know which one of these was your favorite, if you had a favorite. If you did, go ahead and leave that in the comment section down below, because I'd love to know what you liked best. If you liked this video, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And as always, thank you guys so much for stopping by.